a vineyard right here in our region was the first to make organic wine.
Well, 25 years on, and Sedlescombe Organic Vineyard in East Sussex not only produces white wines, but has become the first to make red ones as well. So for the first in our new series of Meridian Country, Sue Kinnear has been to find out how it's done.
We look after the countryside, we drink wonderful wine, we give people wonderful wine to drink, and we just believe that quality is everything. We love it, we believe in it very strongly, passionately.
For Irma Cook, growing organic grapes to make organic wine isn't a job, it's a way of life. She and her husband now have 18 acres of vineyard in Sedlescombe and Bodiam, having planted just 1.5 acres 25 years ago. Then they were living in a caravan, trying to be self-sufficient.
I'd been running an organic garden, and so it was something that I realised could actually work, whereas back then a lot of people were pretty sceptical of it.
So had you had any experience of winemaking before?
Yeah, it was my hobby. In my self-sufficiency days, I used to make wine out of all kinds of things, beetroots, pea pods, anything really. When we decided to have a go at growing vines, there was really only one way that I really wanted to try and do it, and that was organically.
So what made you think, oh, let's plant some vines? How did that happen?
Well, that happened because my girlfriend at the time, she was working down in the village at a restaurant that's not there anymore on the village green, and she told me that there was that they were serving this English wine from another village further south from here. And the other thing that happened was in the little greenhouse we had this vine, and I bought the vine from this nursery, and along with the vine came this little booklet about growing vines outdoors in this country, because I was trying to just find out how to grow one grapevine for this greenhouse, you see. And I was teaching English as a foreign language, so I used to finish about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I had a nice lot of leisure time after that, and I was kind of trying to think, what could I do with this extra time to earn a bit of money, and what best way to use the land. We also became aware of how warm it was, you see, because you're so sheltered from the north because of the hill up behind you, and the whole thing faces south, and it's a real sun trap here, as you can feel today, can't you? And so we was aware how warm it was. One of the things I thought of doing was growing tomatoes under polythene, because I thought, well, to try and make any money out of it, it's got to be something quite intensive, because the size of the area of land is quite small. It was like 10 acres, and 2 of that was wood, so it's very small acreage really to try and make any income from. So we thought about growing the tomatoes under polytunnels, but then when she mentioned about there being this vineyard, and I got this information about growing this vine, I suddenly started to put two and two together, and thought, well, I wonder if it would be worth trying to do some vines here. And then I thought, well, I'd go and see because I thought, well, I couldn't afford to buy the plants. I thought, well, I'd go and see the guy who had the wine in the restaurant, go and see him, and I said, well, what about if I help you with the pruning? Could I collect up the prunings at the end of the day and take them home and cut them up and put them in my garden and make vines like that, you see? So that's what I did. I went and helped him. Much to my mind, I was amazed that he agreed, to be honest. I really was. But I was delighted, really. So I went and helped him with the prune. I learnt a lot about pruning. I bundled all these prunings into the boot of my old Morris Minor, and then all the evening, for 1 hour long, we sat there cutting up these thousands of these sticks, about like that.
Wow. So these were, I don't know what the English word is, they're not veredelt?
No, they're not, no. That's right.
Okay.
Because you see, because England's an island and it's not used to having grapevines, the risk of getting phylloxera, which is the only reason they started veredeling these grafts.
And organic, why organic?
Well, because I'd been used to running the garden organically, and everyone was amazed at how good all the stuff was. Because I suppose I had a lot of time and I put a lot of time and effort into it all.
So you already knew quite a lot about...
So I was aware about soil fertility, how to do it organically, how to try and keep weeds down and all that sort of thing. So that's what we did. We planted the vines into black plastic, and they're still there. That 1,000 up there. The other ones nearer this side, they've come out in the meantime. They weren't all such a good variety. So, but those 1,000 are still there, still going strong.
Gosh, 30 years on.
Yeah.
Quite something.
So now we market the wine from that as old vine wine.
Yeah.
Because over 30 years you can do, you see. Whereas with grafted vines, of course. After 25, 30 years, they become uneconomic because the graft starts to break down, and the whole thing becomes uneconomic. But there's no reason why they shouldn't just go on and on.
So on.
Have you come across woof?
No.
You don't know what woof is?
No.
Oh,
tell me about
interesting.
woof.
Well, woof is a voluntary labour.
I do.
scheme.
I have. I've forgotten.
You have, okay.
Yes, a friend of mine's sister was involved in it, and my friend who has Growing with Grace in Cumbria, it's an organic cooperative.
Right.
So that they have people doing woofing in
I see, yes, that's right.
Yeah, it's an organic volunteer agriculture.
That's what it
yes,
is.
I remember now. I've forgotten about woof, but yes.
Okay,
yes.
Woof was started in 1972 at Tablehurst Farm, the Biodynamic place in Forest Row in East Sussex.
Right.
And now it exists in many countries in the world.
Yes.
Including, Australia, New Zealand, and loads of places.
Yes.
And so that is that has enabled many organic farms to get up and running, really.
Yes.
If it wasn't for Woof, I don't think a lot of organic farms could exist. I mean, this business wouldn't exist without Woof.
Right, so you have a lot of people coming to do voluntary work.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
All right. Okay.
Over how long do they sort of stay
Oh,
for?
they vary a lot, you know, from just a week or 10 days. And we had a guy from California here last week. He was just here for 10 days. So you do meet a lot of incredible people, really.
Yeah.
And do these people then go into doing their own stuff after a while?
Well, people come here for many different reasons. People from abroad, a lot of them come because they want to improve their English. We've had some from France, from agricultural colleges. We've had some from wine colleges. So they come for a lot of reasons, really. I suppose generally they're people that kind of are interested in the environment, perhaps. Or they're interested in learning English. You know, those are the two sort of main sort of things. Or they're interested in travelling to meet other people and see new things and all that sort of thing.
And they find you through the Woof
websites.
They do,
that's right. Yeah, and we've been taking woofers since 1984, since we started.
Right.
So we're one of the older hosts going. Woof has been going now for 40 years because they had their 40th birthday a little while ago, and we sent up a couple of cases of wine to their celebrations.
Nice.
Because I mean, this place, as I say, it would not exist without Woof, because there's far too much work that me and my partner could do.
Yes.
And you can't, on a small scale that we were, you couldn't afford to pay someone a proper wage to do it. So it's helped it to become established.
Would you say there is also a feedback in the sense that they bring stuff to you and there is an exchange?
Very much so, particularly in the case of these two Germans, because it was only through them that we finally took the plunge to go biodynamic, because they were very keen on it. I had sent off for the application form in 2001, but I didn't pursue it any further because it all seemed so complicated and woolly, and I thought, oh, this is all a bit weird. And then of course there was this Channel 4 Monty Walden.
Right. Was it in France or Italy?
That's right, it was in France. That's right.
Yeah.
And he had this TV program about working these vineyards biodynamically. Okay, tell us what you're doing there, Inga.
All right. Well, this morning we collected fresh cow manure from a small non-commercial herd, which is just living on the field next door, basically, which is very lucky for us in a way to source it from such a local kind of source of cows. So that's what we have here, and then we have a look, and then we have female cow horns. So we stuff them with the manure, and then later on we will bury them in the soil and in the pit, and leave them over the winter time in the pit, because there's a lot of activity actually happening during the winter time in the soil. So it's quite an active life during that time. So that's why we leave it during the winter months. And then next spring we will dig it up, and then it should be transformed into a lovely kind of sweet-smelling, earthy substance, which we will then spray onto the vineyard soil to enrich microorganisms and activate the soil life. So now we are up at our Millennium Vineyard, and that's where we buried the horn silica like 6 months back. So it was buried in the summer time, where all the light forces are at its strongest. So this is the substance we then spray onto the leaves to strengthen the wine and to promote photosynthesis. Also, again, in very tiny quantities we do that. So, and into the same pit we now put the horns stuffed with manure now. So we have about 10 horns here, and now I'm placing them into the pit. So it stays here for quite some time, and then spring next year we come back to it.
Around the spring equinox, isn't it?
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And on a descending moon? Till the spring.
Yes.
See you in the spring. This vineyard was, as I mentioned earlier, the first organic vineyard in England, and it was also the first vineyard to produce biodynamic English wine. Biodynamic originated in the 1920s. A German anthroposophist called Rudolf Steiner is credited with the foundation of biodynamics in a series of lectures that he gave, and he gave them to farmers who were beginning to become disillusioned with the chemical agriculture and what it was doing to the soil in Germany at that time. And so it is actually the original form of organics. And have you heard of homeopathy? Yes. Okay, well, anyone who understands about homeopathy, they'll have a little bit of sympathy for biodynamics. Anyone who probably thinks homeopathy is crazy will probably think biodynamics is crazy. Okay, so very, very warm welcome to Sedlescombe Organic Vineyard. What we've got planned for you is a really guided tour around the vineyard, show you what we do, and then we visit the winery, show you how the wines are made, and then at the end we'll be right there at the bar in the barn to give you a wine tasting. English wine is relatively new in the modern era, but the Romans are the ones that first introduced the vines. So there may well have been some grapes lurking not far from here in Roman days, because through the wood there is an old Roman road. And the Romans introduced the vine, and it was mostly in the monasteries where the vines flourished, because they needed the wine for their religious purposes. But then, as some of you may know, a famous king, Henry VIII, he did away with all of the monasteries, and consequently most of the vineyards went with them. And it wasn't until, well, the early part of the 20th century, there were a few little vineyards left. There was one, for example, near Cardiff, and that was about the last commercial vineyard in the UK, and that ceased production in the early days of the First World War because they could no longer import the sugar that they needed to pump up the alcohol. So then there was just about zero wines in England, apart from maybe the odd one in people's gardens, right up until what is now called the modern revival, and that started in the early 1950s, and a few brave souls tried to start to grow vines in their gardens, and there was a man that had a little research station, and then in the 60s there were one or two vineyards planted. There was one near Southampton, that's credited with being the actual first commercial vineyard of the modern era. That's at Hambledon in Hampshire. And that was about the mid-60s, I believe, when that one was planted. Now, today there's around 4 million bottles of English wine produced. Sounds like quite a lot, but actually it's only the consumption of the UK for one day. So it's just a drop in the ocean, really. With organic growing, you've got to find alternative solutions for three problems: the soil fertility, the weed control, and the disease control. So if we take the first one, soil fertility, part of what that is these green manure crops. Okay. And in here you have special plants chosen for their beneficial effect on the soil. Okay, you've got beans, which fix nitrogen from the air, planted especially to enhance the soil fertility. And of course, they actually draw in a lot of insects and then birds. So actually the side effect of this is that we're actually enhancing the natural habitat of the place. So, and you won't find this in conventional vineyards.
There's some wonderful grapes that we picked this morning. Started at 7:30 in the morning. It's rather wet at the moment, but they're all doing a wonderful job.
We've got all the backers done.
Have you?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
The 3 bits of Reichensteiner.
Okay.
And we're on the last block over there.
Lovely.
Oh dear.
How it's going here. It's a little bit wet today. Drizzling from beginning on, but the grapes look pretty good. These are Reichensteiner. So let's have a look if we can go and show you some of those. They look quite nice. Right, a few more here. Here we go. Nice grapes. See, winemaking grapes are always smaller than big eating grapes.
The right time to pick the grapes is arrived at by measuring their sugar level and acidity. Both of these are important factors in making a good wine. Here we see members of the Commission for Sustainable Development, who came down for a day out and had a guided tour, then spent the afternoon helping us with the harvest. Their help was much appreciated. Here they are in Vineyard 1 picking our Reichensteiner grapes. These are used to make our award-winning dry white wine. And here are some of our Regent grapes. These go to make our popular red wine. The last of the harvest, our Seyval Blanc and Pinot Noir, were picked on the weekend of the 22nd to 23rd of October, and this was the end of the harvest for us. Once the grapes have been picked, they are taken into the winery and the processing starts. Here we're putting our Pinot Noir grapes through the crusher. This pierces the skin and lets the juice start to flow. To produce a red wine, the juice has to stay in contact with the skins for a week or two. This allows the juice to take the colour out of the skins and is called lying on the pulp. The grapes tend to sit on top of the juice and have to be pressed down 3 or 4 times a day. This can be very strenuous exercise. When the winemaker decides that the colour is right, it will all be transferred into the grape press and pressed at pressures up to 6 bar.
Plastic crates, and they're brought into here, and then they get passed through a crusher which separates the grape berries from the stalks, and it also pumps the grape berries into this press. This is a sort of state-of-the-art tank press that inside it has an inflatable bag, and it works with compressed air, and so the grapes are fed in. Then when you start the machine, this bag inflates and it pushes the grapes against the perforated slats inside, and the juice runs out into a tank in that corner there. And then the bag will deflate, and then it will trundle a few times to break up what we call the cake, reposition it, and then it will pump up again. And it does that repeatedly for about 2 hours. So it's very gentle and very efficient. And at the end, you get out just a very dry pips and skins, and all the juice is pumped off into one of these tanks where it's left overnight to form a sediment, and then you pump off the clear juice off the sediment the next day, and that clear juice is what is fermented. Being biodynamic, one of the things that we have to do is to use wild yeast. So the wines ferment on these natural yeasts, which should impart more diversity and more complexity into the wines. And that's different from what conventional wineries do, where they buy in yeasts from elsewhere, which then some people would argue you get a wine from South America, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, and they begin to all taste the same. So the biodynamic principles is trying to get all the wines to taste different according to where they're from. So we do that for whites, reds, rosés, and sparkling wines. The only time we use bought-in yeast is when we make the sparkling wine, when we bottle the wine. Well, first of all, with sparkling wine you have to make a base wine, as we call it, then you bottle it, then you add a bit more sugar, and then you add some bought-in yeast, because when you're trying to get the yeast to work in the bottle, which already has quite a bit of alcohol in it, and it's going to build up pressure because it's in an enclosed space, then you want a really effective, good yeast. And so that's the only time in biodynamics when you can use bought-in yeast. For red wine, the process is slightly different because you just crush the grapes and then you ferment them, what we call on the pulp. So the wine is fermented with the pips and the skins together to start with, and then it's pressed after it's done, 10 days or 2 weeks fermentation in contact with the skins, because the key thing is with red wine, the colour is in the skins, so you need to ferment it together with the skins. So then with the white wines, going back to the white wines, after they've fermented, you then get a sediment in the bottom of the tank of all the dead yeast, and so you need then to rack the relatively clear wine off of this sediment, and then it's filtered using those machines just over there. And then with the white wines, they're bottled in the early spring, sort of March, April time. The red wines are still in the tank. In fact, that tank in the corner is full of red wine, and this black tank here is full of red wine. And that wine will be bottled next week. Yeah. Sparkling wine from last year we've already bottled. Like I say, you make the base wine, then you bottle it, and then it's left for at least 9 months, sometimes much longer, 2 years, 3 years, on the lees, as they call it, which is the yeast that forms in the bottle, and that creates the sought-after, toasty, yeasty flavours that are so sought after with sparkling wines. And rosé wine is a sort of byproduct of red wine, really, because when we crush the red grapes, it takes the stalks out and you get crushed grapes, which means juice, skins and pips, into a vat, and it's very slightly pink. So what you do then, you pump that off. We pump off about 20% of the juice when we crush the red grapes for rosé, mainly for the purpose of concentrating the colour and the flavour in the red wine. But it has the side effect that you're creating rosé wine. And then that juice there, that rosé juice, that's made in the same way as white wine, in the sense as it's filtered and bottled about the same time as the white wines are. And there's about a dozen different additives that can be used in conventional wines. For organic and biodynamic, most of those are not allowed. There's only 2 or 3 which are allowed. One is bentonite, which is a clay, which we use to help clear the wine and to prevent protein hazes. The other one is sulfur dioxide, which is used to stop wines oxidising and going brown. In other words, to give them a longer shelf life. If you just made wine without sulfur dioxide, most of it would end up kind of brown and sherry-like, which is how wine may have been in the Middle Ages, but it would be difficult to persuade people that that's what they had to drink now. So even in organic wines, biodynamic wines, there's usually some sulfur dioxide. But the limits that we have to work to are about 1/3 less than the limits that can be added to conventional wines.
Okay.
And the other thing is corks. Yes, we always use corks because we're very aware that there are some unique ecosystems in Portugal and northern Spain. In fact, I got a letter through the post a couple of years ago to say that I had been awarded the Golden Acorn Award, and we got invited to go to northern Spain to see the cork factories and to go up into the foothills of the Pyrenees to see these cork forests. And they did present me with this Golden Acorn Award. It was largely to do with the fact that we had been promoting on our website that vineyards, wineries should be using cork and not switching over to plastic and metal. Mostly, I feel, because of the unique ecosystems that exist over there and the communities that depend on those products. It was explained to us while we were over there that wine corks are the most profitable part of the cork industry, and if they lose that, then a lot of those cork forests, which are teeming with wildlife now, would revert back to being conifer forests, and most conifer forests don't really have the diversity of wildlife that you get in sort of cork forests. And so when you buy a wine, try and buy some with corks.